Howdy. Thanks for listening to Let the Movie Speak. Before we get started, we'd like to ask a favor of you.
It's a simple favor. If you could just rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen, that might help other ears get into our ecosystem here and hear another episode. Anyway, enjoy the show.
Let the movie speak.
Hey, gang. I always wanted to say that because it's out of favor and usage in our vernacular, and it sounds a little old school. Anyway, I am Justin. You are listening to Let the Movie Speak. We're in the middle of doing some heist movies, and the guy that usually introduces this and has never said "Hey, gang" in his life is...
Hi, I'm Travis. I'm here too.
And we are talking about a movie I think we were excited about it before we watched it, and now that we've watched it, I think we're really excited about it. This is Michael Mann's feature film debut, 1981's Thief,
Yes.
starring James Caan and Tuesday Weld. Very excited to get into this, but before that, Mr. Travis, how are you doing on this fine podcast day?
I'm doing fantastic. Not as fantastic as some of the characters in this movie end up doing, but I am ready to
Indeed.
get into this. It's kind of a set of heists in this one rather than just the one build-up heist. But yeah, I'm excited about this this movie and this episode and just how the heist series overall is going. Ready to get it unwrapped and unrolled and unpackaged and just take a big old bite out of this cookie.
Well, to add to that list, before we open the safe and crack it proverbially and literally, stay tuned to the end of the episode for that, listeners. Travis, should we discuss what we've been watching this week?
That sounds fantastic. Maybe we should limit it to just a one thing. If this one particular thing might take the amount of time I imagine that it might. Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we're thinking the same thing, my friend. We're talking, of course, about WandaVision. If you've listened to any of our other episodes recently, you will know that I think we've discussed every other episode on this show. So we thought it fitting to wrap it up and discuss the finale, which I think we were not quite satiated by. What was your take, Travis? Where do we start with this?
Well, so let's just quickly, we really loved the beginning few episodes of the show, and then it took a funky turn in the middle where it kind of stopped being what we liked about it. Episode 4. You get to go outside of the hex and you get to learn about all the characters that are not that interesting and poorly written and not Lynchian or weird. And it kind of had varying degrees of success from that point on. Some episodes were pretty strong still and found a good balance, and some more relied on the Marvel tropes, the more crowd-pleasing kind of things.
The formula.
Yeah, the formula. And for me, this final episode basically succumbed to most of the worst parts of what the show, I think, was from time to time. There was some good. I mean, there's some really good stuff in here that I wish it was inside of the show would have been really well served to come full circle somehow, kind of aesthetically and narratively. It started really small, with that Dick Van Dyke kind of send up aesthetic episode, and I would have loved to see it. I don't know about necessarily wrap back around to that particular set and the black and white and the live audience and all that. I think there would have something conceptually like that would have made me a lot more happy as a viewer, and I'm probably not the normal Disney Plus subscriber, but I think the immediate climactic sky battles that just ensued from kind of minute 1 through the end were a bit exhausting for me. I don't find myself compelled by watching either green screen or CGI people or whatever's happening there. I like people in a room, conflict and tension, and so I'll pick out some specifics to kind of poke fun at, but I really liked. I like that little boot gag at the beginning. Honestly, I don't know if that worked on you. It's kind of a dumb thing, but the Scarlet Witch, Wanda rather, because she, I guess, literally becomes the Scarlet Witch here at the end. I'm not. The mythology is a little muddy, but regardless, she kind of knocks. Who's the bad lady again? Galinda, Callista, Agatha, that one. She knocks her out of the sky and like throws a car at her, and then when she goes to find her under the car, there's just a set of boots there, which is just like I think it's a kind of a fun, tongue-in-cheek, little Wizard of Oz gag. I kind of like that. I would say that the content of the conversation between Vision, Wanda's Vision, and the resurrected Vision, the White Vision, I guess we'll call him, was definitely a nice swing. That whole ship of Theseus, thought experiment thing, I think had some real potential. And then I think the dialogue and the kind of thrust of what they tried to do with Wanda and Vision in the last moments of their time together, that really well acted, and some good writing in there. Kind of like that moment where they were on the bed and a couple episodes ago, where it's about humanity and not just about Infinity Stones or the like. Other than that, everything around that stuff I found honestly pretty forgettable in the grand scheme of Marvel lore. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. You're just talking about that ending where they part and they know they're parting. To me, this whole, excuse me, had a podcast burp. Everybody, enjoy that. To me, this whole series is much better and more cohesive. Although I admit, probably a lot tougher if they actually stuck to the sitcom format for the entirety of this show. Yeah. So even if you have to go and show me, director Bland Hayward or whatever,
General Generic,
and Monica Rambeau, General Generic, that's way better. Thank you. Even if we have to go visit those characters, fine, but can we still confine them to those kind of sets? And I know that kind of breaks, because the premise of the show is no, Wanda's created her own Wanda world, we're calling it, or the Hex.
Which no one's calling it until they are 5 seconds after she makes that joke.
Yeah, it's not good. But to me, that's a missed opportunity because this is such a different story. So I think that honestly, it would have served the story better and just been a better product overall if that trend continued throughout as much as possible. And then at the end, when they're tucking their kids into bed, yes, it does go back black and white as the walls of her world are closing in. You're back in that 50s set, even as the red is coming nearer, and even as they're saying goodbye to each other. Why not have her go back to her 50s wardrobe and makeup, and him the same? And then they're kind of saying goodbye to each other in a way that they would want to choose to remember each other in this kind of imaginary world. I mean, is that, like you said, I agree that's already a strong part of the episode, but to me, when I watch that, I just think, this is really brings up the froth in my esophagus that really demands, you started out so strong and so committed to this idea, and then you just were like, well, we got you reeled in, welcome to regular Marvel land, and it's it's kind of it's a big letdown, and that it chooses at the end really to kind of forego any kind of while I did like that Wanda doesn't get full, I was worried that White Vision was going to kind of like swoop back at the very end and be like, it's okay, Wanda, I remember you. Mwah, mwah, mwah.
Yeah.
I thought that's not going to be good. Thankfully, that doesn't happen. And she just, like that's life. Even if you're a freaking superhero, you're still human, at least a little bit, I guess. And so you still have to contend with grief, and you're not God, so you can't control this stuff.
Right.
And so I thought that was a good choice. But it also, I think, brings out the kind of... At its best, Marvel's really fun. At its worst, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And sometimes that overlap is really close. So sometimes, like Iron Man 1, right? What is this? This is really fun. And at the very end, you get Nick Fury in a post-credit scene. And although his name isn't said, it's like, that's Nick Fury.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a nerd anyway. Which I was and was excited about way back in 2008.
Yeah.
But now, it's just every single movie has one of these post-credit scenes, or multiple of them, including WandaVision, and it's just like, and it's to the point where it's like, stories have to have an end.
Yeah.
Right? I do not want to watch Days of Our Lives with people in spandex and superpowers. That is not, I don't really think that, yes, I mean, Marvel, you can continue to make movies, right? I don't think, but at the same time, they have to, this show is a perfect example of a missed opportunity to just this is our short series, this is about Wanda's grief, we're going to end it. It doesn't mean she has to die, it doesn't mean she can't show up in other movies, but to me, having that post-credit scene where she is just, and it's a Marvel, that 10 seconds probably cost $1 million or whatever to shoot. I mean, it's great camera angles, whatever. And you're in Sokovia or whatever, and then she's like, the Scarlet Witch in the background looking at the naughty book. I don't mean anything crude by that, just the magic book or whatever.
It's like the Book of the Dead or something. Yeah.
Right. The Darkhold, it's called.
Yeah.
Right? It's like,
cool.
That just, to me, that blows everything that you've tried to say about her closure and whatever out of the water.
Right.
I'm okay if that's like in another movie, like apparently she's coming back in the next Doctor Strange movie. Okay, that's fine. She can do that. But to me, that just undid all that you tried to tell me about that character. Like, nope, she's just going to have to work through it. Like, she can't get what she wants,
Yeah.
So to hear her at the end kind of calling out, or her kids are calling out for her somehow, and she's reading this magic book, it's a bummer to me, man. And to me, it's while I don't doubt that there's because it's good enough that people are not going to bail on it, it's probably going to encourage people to continue watching some of this stuff.
Right.
It doesn't aim as high. Its sights start considerably high, and they get considerably lower by the end. To me, that was the biggest bummer.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, now let's pick on some specifics because we, I think, called this out a couple episodes ago. Was it in a Marvel thing? Yeah, probably a WandaVision bit we were doing. But like, what do we have here in the end, right? We have like a good witch versus a bad witch. And we have like a good vision.
A good vision versus a bad vision.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there's so many things in this particular episode that like if the episode was better, I would not care, but I couldn't help but notice these because it just, first of all, this episode is utterly devoid of humor. Like there's nothing funny in it at all. No levity to balance out all of that apocalyptic action.
Just the boots.
Yeah, and in a way, it's like weird because it's a Disney property, and when the family all just like lands and superhero fists up, I'm like, okay, this is the Incredibles. It's just not as fun, Like
right.
It was just
right.
So there's that whole thing is a big issue, but there's also really stupid stuff like when Agent Wu takes the phone like secretly somehow right in front of everybody, and he sticks it behind his back. There's a freaking armed guard right behind him. And he's just like as an actor, he's just like pretending not to see that. And then, he's in handcuffs. He finds a safety pin because everybody keeps one of those on them. And like in 3 milliseconds, he just goes like out of them. There's things like that where they're expecting you to suspend some really large amounts of disbelief. that were annoying. I did write down zombie witches. Cool. I don't know that they belong in this at all, but it was kind of an interesting moment where they became really creepy looking zombie witches. Did your kids watch this with you? Because I was watching that by myself thinking like, wow, I'm glad my kids didn't watch this episode because that probably would have freaked them the crap out.
Yeah, my kids have not seen WandaVision at all. I don't think they'd quite... I think there'd be a lot of questions, like, what is going on?
Yeah, my kids watched like probably like maybe episode 3 with me or something. Like maybe the 70s one. I don't know, like the baby one, I think. Like in that one they were like watching but not really like they certainly weren't laughing, but they were like, "Huh, okay, there's some stuff happening." Like it wasn't definitely wasn't landing for them. Didn't land for them. Yeah. This didn't really land for me, mostly because it was just overly serious and I don't It felt like the last 3 episodes really like sprinted into, okay, here's a villain, here's a mythology, and the whole like becoming the Scarlet Witch thing at the end, and like basically she gets a new costume because it's not everybody knew her as that superhero character in the Avengers films, and it's like here she gets, I guess, attached to that mythology officially or something. I don't know. Also, I thought her costume was stupid. Like the new costume looked really dorky and way more like Wolverine's yellow spandex from the comics that they make a joke about in an X-Men movie at one point.
Yeah.
Than like anything that falls in line with like the more subdued sort of, I don't know if you could call them realistic, but like less loud. But then, like, this costume is like, wow, Halloween costume. It looks like the Halloween costume she was wearing a couple episodes ago.
Yeah. Yep. I don't disagree, unfortunately. It's a delicate balance, right? Like, because you're dealing with superheroes. And so I think that's kind of I think that this show, more than any, has kind of pushed the boundaries of... The difference between Marvel and DC has been Marvel knows how to have fun and DC doesn't know how to get you out of agony.
Yeah.
So far. And so, this show is really kind of towing that line. And I think when you're having fun, you can get away with really colorful costumes and Captain America being really righteous. And, it's all kind of like fun and games. But when you have a woman who's like, I'm grieving over my lost children and husband, and here's my new spandex, it's like, oh, that's not the same. Yeah. I don't find that as interesting. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, overall, Travis, I don't think that they totally whiffed like we predicted they were.
Yeah.
After watching episode 4, not a total crash and burn. But maybe a landing where only like a little bit of the landing gear deployed, and some of it did not.
Yeah, nothing was as bad as episode 4. Like, episode 4 sucks. Like, you could literally skip it and you wouldn't miss anything. Like, you don't need to know anything that they tell you in episode 4.
Right.
I do think, like, and I'll say this because we just mentioned our kids. As a parent, I take a little bit of issue with the final sequences of the movie. Like, I just don't understand how, like, if you are a Marvel executive or a showrunner here, or if you're one of the actors in that scene where she kisses her kids goodnight and then says goodbye to them forever, potentially, I don't understand how like Wanda could have been, growing into loving these people, and then they are like real somehow, and then she just says like, thanks for choosing me to be your mom. Good night forever. I just like that. I didn't swallow that pill, and it almost felt like a weird betrayal. If you have kids and you're like, you can't just, I'm sorry, if these are your children, like that's not happening. Right. I don't know if you can do anything like push the hex out and make, whatever. Like, I don't know. Like the rules they set up at the end were so flimsy that moment just felt like really weird and manipulative. And then of course the stinger that you already mentioned is like, well, there's still some hope. Again, like one of my biggest beefs with Marvel is they never commit to a decision. You know what I mean? Like the snapping of the finger erasing half the world, they all come back, or whatever. They fix it all. I mean, right. and like no one ever really. I guess they killed Tony Stark, but maybe he'll come back in a stinger in the Warhawk and
exactly
Metal Machine. What's the next show?
Biceps and pectorals.
That's it.
Let's see. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Cool.
And it comes out in just a few days after this recording. Anyway.
Convenient. I'm not watching that, just for the record. I'm moving on with my life.
No, I mean, I may try the first 5 minutes, but if it's what it looks like it is, that will probably be all I watch.
Cool beans.
Yeah,
Well,
and just to your point about like when Jimmy Woo's trying to get out of his handcuffs or get on the phone, and idiot is right behind him. The kind of the way that Marvel has begun to treat, I think it's gotten progressively worse. Anyone that's not a superhero is a complete idiot and just completely expendable. And the other great sin that this show did, I think, with regards to that, happens when General Generic tells Darcy and Jimmy and Monica to get out or whatever.
Yeah.
And they take him out in handcuffs or something. And then there's these armed guys that all have like M4s, and then Darcy and Jimmy just start punching them, and they disarm them. I was like, okay, if someone's got superpowers, I guess maybe I'm buying that a little bit, like you're too fast to react to or something. But this is just reality of that scene is this, right? Hi-ya! Bam, 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 bam! Oh, wow, this is really freaking sad. Like, we just had an officer-involved shooting, and everyone's dead. But it's just like, that's the reality, right? So I'm okay with a little bit of suspension of disbelief, but when we just treat every single person that's not a superhero as some kind of clown, or like just a child, or it's not cool, man.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long a franchise can survive where normal people are not a threat at all. Because honestly, and this will be the last thing I say, I think that's going to be the most alienating thing about this series, is if normal people like you and I are just trash, essentially. Why bother going to watch the gods play?
Yeah, I agree. So in that situation you described, there would have been multiple civilian casualties, and consider us two of those casualties from having watched the finale of WandaVision. And I think it's time we ground ourselves in a more realistic world and see what kind of plan we can hatch for 1981's Thief.
What's in the case?
That information isn't necessary.
Is it heavy? Is it explosive? Is it chained to some unlucky bloke's wrist? We're gonna have to chop it off?
All right.
What is it?
What in the bag she gave you?
She didn't give me a bag. Melanie was not a part of the plan.
Oh, no, we can get through the rock. No worries there. Easiest thing in the world. Why, we just blow right through it.
10 ought to do it, don't you think? You think we need one more? You think we need one more? All right, we'll get one more.
Okay, so 1981. This is our first, neon-laden, sweatband wearing, Ray-Ban poppin' trek into the 80s at all. But this is, as I think you mentioned, Michael Mann's film debut, which is going to be a remarkable thing to keep saying because this is a Criterion movie, if that means anything to you. This is like a really well-regarded film. He has multiple credits, right? Director, script, and executive producer. So he obviously had an immense amount of creative control here. This is Michael Mann's movie. I don't think there's any doubt about that. For me, I have heard so many good things from varying sources about this movie, and I'm a big fan of Heat and Collateral, and what I liked the one that no one else liked. I like Public Enemies too. So my first time watching Thief, though. How about you, Justin?
Yeah, first time watching Thief. I think one of the first things I saw by Michael Mann was a rerun of Starsky and Hutch as a kid.
Oh,
he wrote some episodes of that, and they're, Michael Mann continues to evolve, and frankly, with the exception of maybe his latest film at time of recording, which I think is still Black Hat, not necessarily very good, unfortunately, but with exception of that, his productivity and the things that he creates continue to be more and more good, to use a very scientific term. And I'm with you. I as a kid, I was like, wow, this is really dark. Believe it or not, his Starsky and Hutch episodes were kind of dark for that show. That had lines like, "Dispatch, be advised, we're following a suspect to his own funeral," or it's just like really stupid stuff. But anyway, his episodes were not like that.
Yeah.
And were really interesting. So yeah, I also love Heat. Like you, I think that's one of our collective favorites. Love Collateral, love Last of the Mohicans. I could just keep saying other movies that I love by him, but yes, I think suffice to say, you and I are big Michael Mann fans for a lot of reasons, and I had not seen Thief either, and I'm really glad that we decided to do this, because this is to give a spoiler alert, this is a freaking home run. I think
this thing is a banger. I really enjoyed it. But let's give. I love, at least on IMDb. I'm not sure this is pulled off of a VHS tape or a laser disc anywhere, but this is the log line on IMDb, and I think this is the plot summary, which is great. I love, again, a plot summary you can write on a napkin. That's kind of my favorite kind. An ace safecracker wants to do one last big heist for the mob before going straight. That's it. That's the movie. I think that was the PowerPoint, the 1981 PowerPoint. He probably had one of those overhead projectors with transparencies and dry erase markers.
Listen up, boys. That's it. One slide.
That was it.
Next, please.
And background to this movie is that it's his project kind of all together. We have, a relatively small cast. I don't know the size of budget for this, but I would imagine it wasn't nearly some of the other blockbuster movies that it would have competed with. I know that this is the same year as Escape from New York, I think, which would have been a kind of comparable movie, maybe a little bit more of a money grabber. But that's kind of what you're looking at in 1981. There's a couple interesting behind the scenes things that would probably fit well into the intro section here. The lead part was turned down by Mr. Al Pacino, which would have been interesting casting, I think. And it turns out that Jeff Bridges was Mann's first choice for this part, and I could see either of those, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah,
but I think we'll find that James Caan, he does just fine. So, any other intro information before we? Oh, I guess music by Tangerine Dream. That'll come back.
Yeah, no, I mean it is. I think this was the first movie that Jim Belushi was in. Didn't know he was going to be in this. That was kind of fun. I think Dennis Farina, he plays a very small part in it. Really, I mean, it's only, I guess, interesting if you know Dennis Farina, because he doesn't really do anything that's all that interesting. But Willie Nelson, quite a surprise in this.
Yes.
It's very, very little screen time, but it's used remarkably effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert Prosky as sort of the big bad, if you will, really bringing the acting chops. Well, really everybody does in this movie, right?
Yeah.
There's no shortage of people that are freaking chewing scenery and at the top of their game.
Yeah, agreed. Let's break into this safe, my friend, and find out what the goods are.
You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off.
I want to take over his operation, and I need you to help me break it.
What want to do to me, eh? I've got Jessel's money.
I thought it was understood that when it came to our little enterprise, Mom was the word.
So, the top of this story, at the beginning of this film, we get a heist. This was a good pick for our miniseries for multiple reasons. One, it wasn't the Pink Panther. And two, has some compelling heist moments. So I love the way that the story is told, the simplicity of it, but it's not. There's a line between simplistic and simple, right? And this movie,
agreed,
really lives in the former in the best way possible. We have a very simple setup, like we mentioned, and all the weight is put on a small number of lead actors. It's kind of an ensemble cast, other than James Caan is clearly. I mean, it's James Caan's movie for the whole time, essentially. He's in every scene, if I'm not mistaken. And so he starts out as a utterly proficient safe drilling thief, and we see him masterfully pulling off this heist that is not unlike something we witnessed in the Asphalt Jungle, and again, any film between those two. As we said, the Asphalt Jungle really it kind of paved the way for this scene that we've seen a bunch of times. A guy sweating over a drilling through a safe and getting the stuff out. But you do notice immediately, and might as well just get this out of the way at the top here. You notice the score right away. It's a huge part of what this film, I think, creates very successfully, which is atmosphere. You know what I mean? Like immediately you get a feel for Chicago and the... I wouldn't call... Okay, I used the G word, grime, when we talked about Asphalt Jungle. I don't know that... this is certainly not a world full of amazing people, but this is a slicker look at a seedy town, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Slick was the word I was going to use. It's not that it's sanitized at all. It's more like, I don't know. It's kind of similar to like the aesthetic without the future of Blade Runner. Like, there's problems, and it's not like a place you necessarily want to live. I don't want to go to some of these alleys that James Caan and Jim Belushi are running through, but at the same time, it's not off-putting and like so. I don't think this movie is trying to be like, this is gritty. I think it's actually, it probably comes from Mann's maybe adherence to and love of trying to portray things realistically.
Yeah.
And, life is dirty and it's beautiful. And so, it's all those kind of oxymorons are kind of on the screen at the same time, I think, which makes it really, he captures that kind of beautifully, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah, what did you think of the music, like, in the first part of maybe the first third of this movie?
Okay, well, when the music first came on with the intro credits, I have to say my reaction was, ooh, boy, and I buckled up for the roller coaster. But it actually, I think it lended itself really well for the most part. Maybe when we get to the ending, we can talk about Tangerine Dreams music that they performed and composed for this. But it's very, before we started, I think he used the word atmospheric, and it just adds to that. Just as Mann's visuals are he brings you into Chicago just like he brings you into LA for heat. You have no doubt you're there, and it feels like, I'm in this place. And so the music really does it. And I think this movie, maybe more than some other Michael Mann movies, the score doesn't just bring you to the place, but it brings you to the time.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's, because some scores are kind of timeless, right? Like even Last of the Mohicans, that has a very sweeping, beautiful orchestral score. But that's kind of like, you could have a modern movie with that kind of score. You could have a movie from the late 1600s or early 1700s with that score, like Last of the Mohicans. But Thief, you're not going to get this score in any other movie. I mean, or any other time period, I'm going to say. Like, you're not going to have the prehistoric caveman movie with this score on it,
Yeah.
It's distinctly 1981. And for that reason, I think it kind of it gets away with it, right? Even though it's kind of dated, and some stuff is, some modern movies are still using electronic music, even like Drive or whatever. It's not that that's totally out of fashion or stupid or something, but for this movie, it feels very at home here, and like that will be its home kind of forever.
Yeah, and it definitely isn't a timeless score, but it's a good match to the aesthetics. And there is this current trend, to be perfectly honest, like you said, like it isn't completely out of style. I think if you look at some of the more like stylistically artsy or indie or whatever stuff, that these heavy synth scores, these atmospheric scores that aren't orchestral, they are made in a studio with keyboards and electronic equipment and that kind of stuff. There is a very specific sect of film right now that does utilize this aesthetic, but it's in a retro way. You know what I mean? They're clearly hearkening back to this specifically, and I would argue, John Carpenter is sort of the godfather of this style of movie score. Started with Halloween, and then he just followed that through, and this movie is very much in that vein. I think the aesthetic flair is almost immediately seen. We see this heist happening with the safe, and then they make it out of that with the goods, and we see this incredible, like, there's so much great camera movement in this film, but like this is the first thing I noticed was like the shot down the fire escapes with the rain just pouring down, and it just like it's miles tall. It looks like it gives you this sense of like these guys are already in the crevices of society, sneaking around like rats almost. And so the visual storytelling, I think, is very, very strong. Not to mention what dialogue there is, and it's not a heavy dialogue movie. It's not like you're going to see conversation after conversation after conversation that just stack up, for minutes and minutes and minutes. It's really like short things to the point, well acted, on to the next thing. For a 2-hour movie, this thing just absolutely breezed by for me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's no lagging here. I think that's kind of a Michael Mann trait, right? His ships are tight. And there's no leakage, and the masts are blowing with the wind in them, and the winds are good.
And the poop decks are well swabbed.
There you go. I was just seeing how many we could get in there. I think we met our quota probably a long time ago, before I even started that list.
Sailor Jerry rum, you can leave the money on the table. Thank you.
And yeah, it's you got it, man. It's a tight movie. It's just... Despite, the kind of, if you think Criterion Collection, like, oh, it must be kind of artsy-fartsy or, not accessible, or... No, it's not. It's an extremely accessible movie, and I think that is one of Mann's characteristics. I recall reading about some interview with him, and he said that watching Doctor Strangelove was kind of the turning point for him, where he realized, I don't have to make, this is a huge paraphrase, listeners, I don't have to make a movie that's just like an indie movie, or like an art house movie, and I don't have to make something that's just really stupid and a crowd pleaser. You can make both, right?
Yeah.
Kubrick is proof you can make both. They can be in the same movie, and so I think that's really driven that kind of philosophy, and that view of filmmaking has really driven him and gives us the kind of solid product we have. Yes, this is a heist movie, but man, do characters here go quite a bit deeper than most heist movies, right? And I think that's on. I mean, really every there's no wasted conversations. There's no like, why did they do that, or that was just for fun. No, everything has meaning here, and I think the highlight of that is in the diner, which Michael Mann loves.
Yes,
in the diner with James Caan's Frank and Tuesday Weld's Jessie. Is that her name?
That's her name.
Oh,
yeah.
Boy.
So let's talk about Frank.
Okay.
Because I mean, the diner scene is where I found my definition of his character. You see him doing his thing with the safe. You see him at his legitimate business, his car dealership, and in a bar, and all that. But I mean, the diner scene comes post the first Willie Nelson scene, and those two combine. He talks to Willie Nelson's character Okla in prison. And he tells him he's got this, his first wife didn't work out. They had to split, but he's got this new gal, and he's interested in, starting a new life with her. And he asks Okla, Willie Nelson's character, who's very soft spoken. He doesn't say a lot, but he has really, he's got Willie Nelson's eyes. So he has like kind eyes, and Okla lays it on him. I mean, he says, well, what do I do? Do I tell her that I'm a thief? Do I just string her along? Do I whatever? And Okla just stops him and says, lie to no one. If you hide something now, it's only going to come back and ruin what you have later, essentially. And that leads right into this diner sequence. And like you said, Michael Mann, he gets all his best work done around a diner table. I mean, nobody forgets the diner scene from Heat, and I think you could pick this scene out of this movie, and I mean, man, it's a killer sequence, and two characters that could be cardboard cutouts. They really do prove to be much, much more in this sequence.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about this is, upon first viewing and immediate reflection of this scene in particular, I thought, maybe they could have gone a little deeper here. And while, I mean, sure, is there a scene or extra dialogue you could have given to make that happen? Absolutely. But I think after more reflection, it's Mann knows how to write his characters. And so while Al Pacino and Robert De Niro in Heat go a lot deeper, those are deeper characters.
Yeah.
One of them is a non-corrupt career cop, and the other guy is a master thief way out of the class. I mean, James Caan is like the journeyman, and
exactly.
And Robert De Niro's character in Heat is like the freaking boss.
James Caan wears jeans, and Robert De Niro wears a tailored suit.
Exactly, yeah. And so I, upon thinking about that more, I thought, no, I'm convinced that diner scene in Thief is pretty much perfect because those characters are not capable of really revealing themselves in more clear terms and definitions than what they give each other. They really are trying. There's no really holding back from Caan's Frank or from Weld's Jesse. They are just laying it out there, but it does fall kind of flat because they're kind of simple people.
Yeah.
Which comes back to bite Frank in the butt big time because he just doesn't have the hardware to really kind of grasp the world that he's in, which ends pretty tragically.
Yeah, I mean, he says here some character-defining stuff, right? Like he tells her his deepest, darkest secrets, and man, they're freaking dark. He talks about his time in the joint, and he says, like horrible, horrible things happen to people in there, and I was next in line, essentially, for those horrible things to happen to. And he tells her this anecdote about how he beat the crap out of all of these people in order to survive, and he just says, you gotta get to where nothing means nothing, and that's it.
Yeah.
He's definitely like young here, but more talented at what he does at thievery than most people his age. But he is old in some ways, like he is as desensitized as a hardened 70-year-old might be to the world if the world was cruel to him in a lot of ways. And one thing I like about Michael Mann, and in this movie and in Heat, is you get strong choices from characters and strong consequences. And there's not this like heavy moralistic sermon-y kind of hand to his work, but there's this absolute acknowledgement that an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You pay the piper. You know what I mean? Like it might be you that suffers. It might be someone else. But like your actions absolutely have consequences, and you're gonna see, like Justin alluded to, the consequences for him and for Jesse. But from there we go. We get some insight into Tuesday Weld's character in that scene as well. She basically says, I don't know if I want to start a life with you. I'm doing a lot better than I used to be when I was running drugs. Is that essentially what she was alluding to there?
Yeah, that was the impression I got. And maybe she was also a harlot on the side, out of necessity or not, as just part of that life. But yeah, whatever she was doing, it sounds way worse than being like the waitress or whatever that she was at the diner.
Yeah. So we get this familiar theme in this movie, which is a really effective plot mover in a lot of heist movies. But it's this idea of the last big score, right? And we see this, I think we've seen this in everything but the stupid Pink Panther so far, right? In Crisscross, this idea of like, I'm going to do this one big score with Slim McGee, Murphy, Jones, what's his name? Slim McPickens. What is it?
Who are we talking about, man?
In Crisscross.
His boss is Leo, I think.
No. I was talking.
Oh. Jeez, I'm not even on the same
Slim
planet as
Dundee.
you.
That's what it is. In
Slim Dundee.
That's Slim Dundee. See, yeah. So there's this last big score thing, is they're just going to rip off Slim Dundee and run off together. And then in the asphalt jungle, Dix is gonna, do this score, and then he's gonna go back to his horse farm. Last big score. Got to get back home. Here, James Caan has this super clear objective. He has this picture he made when he was at his lowest point of the life that he wants, and he just needs this last big score. And what plops in his lap but an opportunity placed there by our big baddie, played by Robert Prosky, in the form of Leo. What did you think of Leo?
I mean, Robert Prosky is an incredible actor. Like, I know that sounds probably superfluous and like no duh, but I don't say that lightly. Travis and I were talking before we started rolling about our love for Frasier again. Robert Prosky's on one episode, and he plays a much different, mild-mannered writer, that probably doesn't even say the word darn. And so to see Robert Prosky just cussing up a storm here and just really, really embodying evil in a believable sense, he's not a caricature like I am completely Satan. He's just a guy that like this is how he's made his money forever. And hey, I can be super pleasant with you, and I can glad hand all day. But if you don't give me what I want, like it's on. I will take down you and your family. And it's just all kind of just his life's business, though. And Prosky really plays it with a great deal of believability, I think. You know what? Near the end of the movie, when James Caan is like, "Nope, I want out," and Prosky's given him all these things, thinking, he's gonna come around. I'm just gonna, this guy thinks he wants out. No. I'm gonna show him a better life. I'm gonna make him, wealthier than he's been before. Give him the things that he wants, support him, and he'll be loyal to me. But he doesn't understand that's not Caan's character. He thinks in simpler terms than that. And so Prosky, he snaps, right? And he becomes very cruel and very evil, but it's in a believable, the turn is like, it's because he's hurt. It's because he's human. He's like, how could you do that to me? I opened my heart and my hand to you, and you've just closed it in return. Don't I'm gonna be mean now.
Yeah.
And I think Prosky plays it with a certain depth that's really really fun to see.
Yeah, I like the fact that you brought those kind of beginning and end of the movie elements together, because it's that progression that really impressed me. In that first headlight scene where he just introduces himself and offers, again, Michael Mann, no fat on the cut of meat here. Like the dialogue they have is like, you got to come work for me. Well, what's that going to entail? Well, you're going to get paid a bunch of money, and I'm going to protect you, and it's going to be great. Well, I work for myself. Thanks. I'll think about it. It's like a very abbreviated, but it could be super cheesy, and it could be like very messy kind of feeling. But he brings a lightness to it, and like almost like he is selling the car salesman this idea of employment to him, and it's this kind of slight warmth. I was not taken aback by his character initially, and I think that's sort of the intention, is like he kind of reels you in as Leo, and then he develops this relationship with Frank, and then there's this slow burn kind of revelation of his true wickedness, because he gets into bed with him business wise. They get the score going, and then James Caan gets some heat. The cops are tailing him and trying to get their cut, and they're obviously the best cops ever. But the offer that he makes to him in that bar, where he's like, "You want a kid? I'll get you a kid. You want a boy or a girl?" I was just like, holy crap, what is this person? You know what I mean? Like, that's the point.
Right.
That's the point where you're like, okay, first you were talking about like, we'll get you set up. I'll get you a good lawyer if you get pinched, all that stuff. And you're like, okay, this all makes some sense. And then he's like, you want a baby? I'll get you a baby. I know people who are trying to sell their baby for whatever reason. And I was just like, whoa. And James Caan gives that same kind of reaction. He's like, geez, man, like, what are you talking about? And then he is seduced by Leo, against his better judgment. You can tell against his character's better judgment. And then obviously by the end, when that at least betrayal from the perspective of Leo takes place, that exchange where he says, I gave you this. Where's my gratitude? James Caan's character is just driven by pure code. You know what I mean? Like, I did the job, I get my money. So he says, where's my gratitude? And James Caan says, where's my end? That's like a spit in the face to him. So yeah, I mean, Robert Prosky really punching above his pay grade in this movie, like brought more to that than he needed to. I think we mentioned Willie Nelson, really well used screen time. What do you have to say about his character?
He's almost not recognizable as Willie Nelson. I mean, he does, if you know it's Willie Nelson, you're looking for Willie Nelson, there he is. But he shows up in prison as Frank is going to visit his buddy, Okla, who is Willie Nelson. And when Willie comes out, I mean, I've seen Willie act in a few other bit parts, and it's not like this. So I don't know what excellent direction he was given by Mr. Mann, but it's clear that it worked. Willie plays it with a real... I mean, and guys, he's in the movie for like 5 minutes total? It's really nothing in terms of the total runtime. But he uses every line that's given to him because, again, there's no fat on the bone. He uses every line that's given to him to great effect and to get across the point that he and Frank have this very deep and later, as Frank reveals, familial kind of father-son relationship. They do love each other in a sense. And he just, what really got me about Willie's performance is just his eyes. They're not, you talked about how they're kind, and I totally agree with that, but I'm just talking about the way he used them in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't quite, he does look James Caan in the eye, but he's also kind of looking around, like almost like something's a little off kilter.
Yeah.
From an acting perspective in a good way, right? Like something is not quite right, and maybe it's because he's been behind bars so long. Maybe it's something else, but whatever it is, man, it just gels so good with the lines he has to give. Like, hey, you got to get me out of here. I'm sick. I got angina, something, something, something. Like that's the greatest medical description of a condition I've ever heard.
It's all you need to know,
and it works really well. It really is, and and the characters in here really know how to communicate dialogue especially, and it's always in service to the end of like, understand my character more, understand me. And so this is kind of getting away from Willie Nelson a little bit, but I think he and Caan and Robert Prosky, they're great examples of playing characters that are just supposed to be real, not to really engender your sympathy. I mean, both Caan and Prosky, they use really horrible derogatory language about, minorities and other people. So it's not, I don't think, and it's not supposed to be like, oh, that's pretty cool, I agree with that guy. It's like, gosh, it's really repulsive, And I just found that really, really good in the sense that it's showing that Frank is just like no duh, why wouldn't he be that guy? He was in prison in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Like, the gangs were all segregated then, and that's just the way those people talk. So I appreciated that they don't try to make Frank the protagonist or even an anti-hero. Like, yeah, you're with him for the ride, and you want to see, like, part of your heart breaks for him, I think. Like, gosh, I wish this guy would really figure it out, and make some other choices. But at the same time, you're not like, yeah, go, go, go. At least I don't think that if you do have that perception, hey, that's your business. For my money, I don't think that's what Michael Mann is trying to drive us to. I don't think he's trying to make us cheerleader for any of these characters.
No, I think you're right. And he's not one to, I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example in a Michael Mann film, and I haven't seen his entire filmography, but of the ones that I've seen, he's not a gratuitous like guy, like visually,
right,
dialogically, or with like sex or violence or any of that stuff. He doesn't wallow in any of those sort of like storytelling pitfalls, I guess. I mean, ways to tell a story in a less tight manner. He resists all that. And one example that I like from a directorial point in that regard is you talked about, characters saying things that, they perpetuate the truths of their character. Everything they say is to give you more insight into their character. Well, James Caan made a really interesting choice in one of those scenes, which is, Okla dies in the hospital right after he gets out of prison, and he gets to whisper something into James Caan's character's ear, Frank's ear. And we never hear exactly what that is, and we're not even 100% positive that he told Tuesday Weld's character the truth, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. And then right after that scene, the doctor's like, "I'm sorry he didn't make it. Are you okay?" Well, apparently there was a line there, and James Caan just chose not to say. He just chose to stare that guy down. And there's this incredible moment where he's just like, you don't know. Like, you don't know. Is he going to punch this doctor in the face? Is he going to start spewing, volcanic expletives? Like, what's going to happen? And there's just incredible tension. And you could tell that Michael Mann was just like, just hold on it. Hold on it.
Yeah.
Hold on. You know what I mean? And then James Caan just walks away. It's James Caan in this movie he's incredible. Like, he does a lot with a minimal amount of dialogue, and that's sort of his strength as an actor. He's one of those actors who is not like wildly bouncing off the walls from character to character. He's definitely not what we would call a character actor, in that he doesn't put on funny wigs and glasses and funny voices and stuff. But what he brings is just like raw charisma and a mastery of the script. You know what I mean? Like, if you look at him in The Godfather or this or Misery or really anything, he does not come ill prepared. As we're talking about how the script is tight, I think the aesthetics follow. That's what makes a really good match here. Is there's no wasted space camera-wise either. Everything here has movement in a purposeful way. It gets you from this to that, or it draws your focus from here to there. And I was really impressed by how cohesive, the whole thing was. I love how it works its way into having a little bit of fun with, the technology to get into this very special safe, to get these diamonds once he gets into this business relationship with Leo. And they go to enough detail to make you buy into that this heist has higher stakes, that there are 5 alarms, that, you need this freaking special torch device thing that has to cut through this steel. And you get to spend time with some of those more imaginative fun elements, but it's never too much. You know what I mean? They never spend 15 minutes talking about what kind of metal they have to light on fire to drill the hole through. It's just you get the idea. And I feel like that might be Michael Mann's driving philosophy is does the audience get it now? Okay, move on. What do you think?
Yeah, I was thinking of very similar thoughts in the actual scene where they're drilling for real into that safe in the final heist. They bring in all this equipment, and there's a big tank of some kind of explosive, hydrogen gas, or I don't know what it is, and it's not. But I thought as they bring this all in, I thought, okay, I as the audience get what this stuff is used for, not because I know exactly what it is, but I get the concept, like you said. I just get the overarching idea, okay, this is the stuff they need to get it to go through the wall. And then I thought, what the heck does that script page look like?
Right.
There is a dolly with a large tank and a long rod. They're going to both hold it. I just thought, Mike, I don't even know. How do you make that succinct, So I don't know. I haven't seen the script. I don't have the answer to that. But it is real talent, I think, to not fall in that trap that you just talked about where, in the heist movie, they have to you get the bird's eye view of them rolling out the plans, and it's okay, big boy, you're going to be over here. Little girl, you're going to come up the flight of stairs. And, it's just
yeah.
I mean, that can be fun. I'm not saying that has no place in cinema, but it is such a strength and makes this movie the tight, muscular thing it is. That we don't waste any time doing that kind of stuff, because this is just not the movie where that happens.
Yeah, and there's no time wasted getting the stuff out, right? This is not one of those, and then something went wrong. I was very refreshed by that, right? We get that in lots of heist movies where they're, Mission Impossible, where his sweat almost hits the ground, or in the Asphalt Jungle when the guard shows up and he ends up dropping his gun and the gun goes up. There's this kind of compulsive need to throw out a catapult of different things for the characters to overcome in this specific moment. And Michael Mann's no, these guys get it done. What comes later is the thing that must be overcome, which is character stuff. And this is probably a perfect place to settle on for a minute here. Tuesday Weld's character, because she ends up agreeing to marry Frank, and they get this nice suburban house together. It looks like they're going to do this again. She's privy to his business as much as she needs to be for him to be honest and kind of follow through on Okla's advice, but also he's protecting her. He says do you want to get out of here when things kind of start to heat up? Well, the heist goes fine, but then, Leo feels betrayed because Frank is not going to do any more work for him, and things start to go really bad. And James Caan knows as soon as I love that about the script too. As soon as he doesn't get his full amount, he knows this was it. This was my last chance, and I blew it. And he starts to make some changes, and I want to bring up another movie here for the purpose of comparison. You already mentioned it, but I think it's just so... it's a study in this movie in 1981 and this movie now in some ways. It's also a study of a more mature filmmaker in Michael Mann, even though this is his debut, and I think less mature. Drive. Okay, so this movie Drive with Ryan Gosling is very, very much indebted to Thief in a lot of ways, right? The lead character feels the same. He's very soft spoken. He's a driver by specialty, not a thief, but he brings immense power to the screen without saying a lot of words. The aesthetics of Drive are a clear, you could say ripoff, or you could say homage, depending on what your mood is, I suppose. but the neon and the score and the way the camera kind of lingers on the dashboard as the lights float, like all of that is very similar. But here's the difference in my mind. Thief could become a revenge movie. You know, Thief could become about revenge, and it's not about revenge. It's about the only possible way I'm going to live is if I do this thing, which is what we see in the last sequence. And in Drive, Justin, we see Ryan Gosling stick a fork in some guy's eye. Is it someone else?
Ron Perlman or the other guy?
That's right. Yeah.
You know, and it's just ridiculous. Like, it doesn't even make sense. Like, you know, if you as a human being were like, I'm a criminal, I'm tired of this person, I need to kill them. There's sadistic and creepy and, you know, strange stuff that happens all the time, but it did not make sense in that script and felt very gratuitous. While this movie is not faced with similar life or death kind of consequences, and you know, Leo has threatened Frank at this point, right? And they've killed his buddy, played by Jim Belushi, Barry. And he said, like, this is all your fault, Frank. You just had to work for me. You're not grateful. You know, I gave you all this stuff, and you what do you mean you're out? You're not out. Like, I brought you into my family. And Leo kind of has a point. Like, Leo, you know, if you were Leo and you gave this person all this stuff that's not required to do a job, including a kid, you know, like we talked about, I would think you would feel like this person would have a little bit of allegiance to you.
Sure.
But instead, Frank's like, no, man, that was never the deal. You gave me what, from Frank's perspective, he's saying, whatever you gave me, that's on you.
Yeah.
I was always out when I'm out, and I'm out now. And Leo makes it very clear, no, you're not, and I'll do horrible things to you. You know, what's really interesting about this movie is there is a lot of really well done expletives, and, you know, the language feels very real. But I don't know if it's a Chicago thing or if it's an early 80s thing, but they'll be like, you blankety 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 blank, why are you such a goof? And I was like, where's that coming from? But
that feels like Chicago, I think, right? Because there was one point where I was actually questioning, because I don't think they ever, if they do, I missed it. But there's Illinois plates on a lot of the cars, which is one of my first clues. But like, not James Caan doesn't have that like stereotypical like caricature version of that accent, but a cop,
right,
when they have him in the like interrogation room for a minute and they're beating him up and stuff, there is one point where it really comes out and he's like, and I'm gonna be there on that day and you better not be there. And that's where I was like, okay, it's Chicago.
yeah, and you know, if we could just take a quick segue into those cops. You know, from the second, really good casting. I really love the casting of Michael Mann, not just in this movie, but in other movies, where, you know, like Robert Prosky and the dirty cop, Sergeant Urizi, or whatever that guy's name is, man, they don't look like Robert Prosky is. They're not attractive, okay?
No, yeah.
I'm not trying to be mean, but it so serves a good purpose. Like, Robert Prosky is this very, like, rotund dude, you know, who just kind of embodies, like, the excess of wealth and greed. And then Sergeant Urizi, just, like, from the second you see him, it's like, ooh, gosh, if that guy's a cop, I hope not, because he looks like Peter Lorre's dirty little brother. Like, I don't want anything to do with him. Like, honestly, when he sticks his head into the window when he pulls Frank over for the first time, I could almost smell his breath.
Yeah.
Like, just imagining, this guy is disgusting, you know?
And his name's Urizi, which kind of sounds like weaselly, you know? Like,
right.
And he even says it like, don't forget my name, Urizi, you're going to need it, you know? And it's like, ooh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just so, I find it really intentional that, you know, and we can tell from Michael Mann's other movies, he's not like some all cops are bastards kind of a guy at all. But in this movie, unfortunately, the ones that we see are
they're
much
bastards
of that ilk. Yeah, and but to great effect. And I mean, for the circle that Frank runs in, I think it's a lot more likely he's going to come across those kind of cops, especially at a big agency. There's the lesson, listeners. Don't apply for a big agency, and don't apply for a really rural podunk agency. You want to find the sweet spot of good mid-sized agency, okay? Which I know everyone wants to in 2021.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Go forth and...
They're lining up right now, yeah. I don't want to run over Tuesday Welt's character because this is the point in the movie where she doesn't have a lot of words, but this is the most important piece of the film for her because she sticks by him even though she knows he's a criminal. She says, "I'm committed to you." And he does And I feel like Frank doesn't do this out of cruelty, although she would read it as such, right? But like he comes to her in the night, he makes the call to get her protection. He gives her a whole big chunk of money and he says, you know, you need to leave. You know, this is over. And he says it in no uncertain terms, you know, no wasted dialogue, as we said. And he just says to her face, you know, like, you're out of here. I'm telling you to leave, you know. And she says, but, and before she can even, her face says everything, you know, all of that betrayal and that rug being pulled out of her and like, I took a chance on you and this is how you're going to end things, you know. But he knows, Frank knows she will not survive this because he's not going to keep working for Leo. And if he doesn't, she's absolutely dead and worse from what we heard from Leo, right? He really becomes like so wicked in that scene where they shoot, you know, Michael Mann shoots him from the ground up and he's kind of towering over you, the viewer. And you see all those lines in his face that his face just looks like it's made out of like, you know, like putty or clay or something. It's so, you know, visceral the way that that's shot. And so she has to process all this pretty much non-verbally. And then he, you know, James Caan is kind of the master of the soft-spoken rage. You know, that's kind of one of his trademarks as an actor. And he really just, he only yells one time in this whole movie. And that's when he's talking to her. And he says, you know, you're out of here. Leave. You know, get your stuff and leave. And she just looks at him like can't verbalize. And he goes, I said get out, you know, or whatever he says, and then she's gone. You know, that's it. That's the end of Frank and Jesse.
Yeah, and I think he does that because he doesn't think he's going to survive what's about to happen, or he knows that it's really unlikely that he will, you know. So I think that's why it would be a much worse movie, I think, if he said, hey, I've got this plan. And his plan is essentially, I'm going to go murder Leo because I know that he's not going to rest until he's killed me and probably you and the child too.
Right.
And so this isn't the movie where he's like, but it's okay. I'll get my friends together and we'll, you know, just make things right and I'll come for you, baby. I think he really is. He's a simple character, but he's wise in his own way, especially in worldly ways. And I think he realizes that, well, he believes he can really kill Leo. I don't think that he imagines that he's going to really survive.
Yeah. He's either going to not survive or he's going to be enslaved to this wicked mob boss, you know, and either way, her life is better off with Bucko or whoever in that Cadillac who she ends up driving away with. And this last sequence is very interesting and, again, not overly long. Doesn't feel abbreviated or cut short, but it is again, like probably the most realistic version of this kind of thing that I remember seeing in a long time. You know, he goes to the big bad guy's house. The big bad guy has a bodyguard and he brings a gun and his chutzpah, and he gets in there, he knocks the guy out, and he makes his way through the house and eventually, you know, pulls the trigger on good old Leo. That's not quite the end of it, but what did you think of the in the house sequence and the final standoff, if you can even call it that? Because there's no Tarantino style guns pointed at each other. Now let's be smarmy and smirk at each other and make 1,000 jokes. There's no time for that in a Mann movie.
No, and especially for 1981, it's just so refreshing. Like there's a couple like slow-mo, you know, people get shot kind of things.
Yeah.
But there's no slow-mo like Matrix diving to, you know, look cool. And Mann, to his credit, like he's done with slow-mo, I think, kind of after this movie, right? Like I don't recall seeing that in more of his stuff. But besides that, it's very grounded. It's just very like, and then that person got shot. And now that person's dead. And, ooh, that probably hurts.
Yeah.
You know? It's just very, just like the dialogue, just like the way this movie is shot. It's just very like, he's not coming in here to make anyone look cool. However, he does make, okay, so watching this movie, when James Caan first, you know, pulls out guns, like in his car with Jim Belushi, he's got his cool little, like, hideaway gun safe in his car, which was very unique. So I first noticed it. He pulls out a gun. He's got two 1911s essentially in this movie, and he pulls out one, and he does what's called a press check on it, which is, you know, I apologize, listeners, if you're not really into firearms at all. That's okay. But this is not about like being cool with guns. This is about, I think this is a real testament to Michael Mann wanting to get things right and to make things look realistic. if your character is really going to be like, hey, I'm a thief, but I also want to know how to use a gun, let's get him actually some training that's modern and current and that makes sense about how he might fight for his life with a gun. And so I think that pays off really well, and that's something we see in later Michael Mann movies, right? We see that in Heat and in Collateral. Those both come to my mind as shining examples of actors that have been trained in using weapons in a way that actually makes sense. And so, yeah, it's very interesting to watch for that reason, I think. And Frank almost doesn't make it out at the end. I guess I mean, if we're going to nitpick, I guess maybe it's a little hard to believe. It looks like he takes some buckshot to the upper arm or the shoulder.
Yeah.
But he makes it out okay regardless. So.
Yeah, I definitely took note of the, kind of systematic way in which he moved around the house. I definitely don't know the granular stuff like you or someone who's like-minded or armored or something. But I did notice that it was different looking, and I could tell it was more realistic looking because he wasn't trying to look cool. Like you said, like
right.
nothing in this movie he doesn't walk around with like his gun with any kind of swagger. He's like, this is a weapon for killing people. And he uses it as such. And when he takes that shot to the shoulder by that lackey out on the grass, you either think he got shot in the shoulder or you think like, oh, maybe he's wearing a bulletproof vest or something. And what I appreciate is he really takes a while to like come back from that. If that hit the vest, there's no way that kind of impact when someone's wearing a bulletproof vest wouldn't knock you the crap out for a moment because you still got shot. I don't care what it is they're shooting you with, and they show a little blood, on his neck or his shoulder. So it's like a few of those pieces of buckshot or whatever must have caught him, but the Kevlar did its job. And in the end, right, this is the end because Michael Mann says, and now the movie's over, folks. Leo's dead on the floor. All the gun heavy folks, are laid out, and he walks away. But what I think is really interesting, and we can kind of bring this into the wrap up here, is he doesn't walk away into the sunset. He doesn't drive away over a sunny sky. He walks onto a street with no streetlights and darkness, and that's the end of Frank's story, because he doesn't have a family to go back to. He doesn't have that, that scrapbook picture, collage that's been balled up and thrown on the ground and basically, set ablaze. That I don't know what happens to Frank after this story, but I don't imagine it's a life of necessarily happiness.
It may be nothing because he's violated his most sacred rule, which he tells Leo when they're meeting each other in the headlight scene at the very beginning of their interactions. He says, look, this is what I steal. This is all I do. I think he says something like, no cowboy shit, no home invasions. Well, and that's what he freaking does at the end. He does a home invasion and he murders people. So I think his own honor, even though he feels like there's no other way out, I don't really see what else I could possibly do. He still knows that, like, I think that's going to change him indefinitely, or maybe that's who he's always been because of what he tells Jesse in the diner, right? Like he essentially had to do the same thing to survive in prison. Now it's just come back in the outside world where he's had to literally just blow his way through his problems. And how do you come back from that?
Yeah, and I'm not sure you do. And it's possible. It's not impossible that he went on to continue thieving, and maybe he did a little time in the joint. What do you think, Justin? Do you think he served any time?
He may have, my friend, or he may have died from gangrene a little while later.
You want about the law or something?
No, it's okay.
I'm so very sorry. I propose that we consider this matter closed.
I sure hope you didn't do anything stupid, Jackie. See you when I see you.
Let's get to it. For me, this is time very well served. If you are looking for a heist movie, I think you get what you're looking for here. If you want the safe-cracking kind of technical wizardry of what it means to actually break in somewhere, and you want to live your gross, vicarious fantasy of stealing diamonds out, you can get it here. But also, Michael Mann is a very good priority sifter as a filmmaker, and these characters have a lot to say, a lot to do. This movie, I think, again, it just reiterates to me that he is a responsible handler of his subjects, themes, and material. Frank makes choices, and those choices have consequences. The same goes for Leo. The same goes for Jesse, his wife, and Okla even. There's a little bit of stages of the career criminal here if you look for it. I think Frank is young in this movie. He is got a lot of potential in this seedy underworld, and he looks up to Okla as I think it's almost alluded to that he was a father figure to him, and you see the end of that life cycle being very sad and melancholy in its end. He gets out of the hospital just in time to die. I'm sorry, he gets out of prison just in time to die in a hospital bed quietly with no real family around him. Robert Prosky is sort of the middle version of that, the hardened, more powerful, more loyalty obsessed version of these guys. And all of this to say, none of these people are people I'd want to have a cup of coffee with, but I very much enjoyed Thief, and I would rewatch this. Oh gosh, I mean, I feel like I'm settling in on once a year is a good spot to be on this meter for me, Justin. And so I would honestly put this in the realm of Mr. Smith and all those movies that I really liked from season 1. This would make an annual viewing for me a pretty enjoyable one. What about you?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's there's no real complaints with this movie, I mean, I guess if crime, drama, or heist films aren't really your thing, you probably wouldn't want to watch it as often. But if you're just a person that likes good film, I think kind of regardless of this movie's subgenres, that's what it is. This is just a solid film exactly about the themes that you described. Like, if you're going to play in the world of Hard Knocks, you might get, dead. Which I think was the original log line for this movie.
That's it.
And it's just it's filmed in such a way where you just feel it just feels true. Nothing here feels like I don't know if I really buy that. It's just like, yeah, if you're gonna live in this world that is it's like watching The Irishman a little bit, or like later Scorsese, where it's the Scorsese gangster movies where it's not glorified. It's just sad, man, to like, yeah, I think if you've never, been in this world or ran in this crowd, maybe some of that looks kind of tantalizing, and certainly there is a little artistry, and just as an act in itself, not the criminal act, but just like the ingenuity it takes to steal this stuff or to orchestrate this. That's kind of impressive and cool, I guess. But, the marrow in that, or, what's really behind that and what you have to give up and how you have to live to do that, I think this movie does a service to viewers by saying, this is what's behind all that fluff. A lot of sadness, a lot of death. You probably don't want to do it. And without being moralistic, though, without even preaching a sermon, it just feels like the inevitable conclusion. After watching a movie like this, which I, like you, would gladly watch probably on something similar to an annual basis.
All right, well, we are working our way right through all of these crimes, these misdemeanors, these heists, as we're calling them. And we are moving on next week to another one. This one's a real mystery to me, Justin. It's JCVD, starring JCVD, Jean-Claude Van Damme, in a sort of meta commentary, something heist thing. What do you think we're gonna see there?
Dude, I don't really know. It could be fun, it could be weird, it could be a bomb. I don't know, but I'm kind of looking forward to it.
Come see if it's a bomb next week. Bye.
See ya.
Let the movie speak.
Hey, since you're still here and still listening, thank you, by the way, we'd like to ask an additional favor of you.
We have social media. It's a thing on the internet, and all you need to do is find us on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook and like and subscribe I know this is annoying, but we have to ask you because we want more people to hear the show. In addition to that, if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, we would greatly appreciate it. See you next week. Bye.